Welcome to the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast. Hi, this is Ken Blanchard. We need a new leadership model in business today, one that values both people and results, where leaders see their role as serving instead of being served. In this podcast, my friend and colleague Chad Gordon interviews experts who help us explore different aspects of leadership. I know you'll be encouraged and inspired by what you hear, and you'll walk away with ideas and insights that will help you be the type of leaders others want to follow. Ready to get started? I'll be back at the end of the interview where I'll share what I've learned and how I'll be putting it into action. Now enjoy this installment of the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast.
It's my distinct pleasure to welcome Patrick Lencioni to the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast. Patrick, thank you so much for joining.
It's great to be here, Chad.
Well, we are excited to have you. You have your hand in so many different things, a prolific author, keynote speaker, consultant. For those that may not be as familiar with your work, tell us how you got started.
You know, I don't know if it's an interesting story, but it's probably not typical. I'm kind of accidentally involved in this. I got out of college and went to and got a job at a management consulting firm. I thought it sounded pretty interesting, management and consulting, and I did neither there. I really was locked in a room doing a lot of grunt work and a lot of analytics. And so I spent 2 years there, and instead of going back to business school, I took another job at a company where I got involved in organizational stuff. Of course, I didn't know what that meant, and I don't think they did either. And from there, I just started kind of teaching myself. And I kept meaning to go back to grad school, but I didn't because I got married and then I got promoted. And before I knew it, I was 10 years into my career and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I loved the human side of business, not in a touchy-feely way, but I just loved the human side of business. And so we started our own firm thinking maybe other companies out there might need this stuff. And 19 years later, by the grace of God, it's gone better than we could have ever expected it. And I started writing books because somebody saw one of my theories and said I should write a book, and I did. And I couldn't believe people actually read it. And publishers said you should write more of these things, and here I am. So I can't say I planned it. There wasn't really a career path for me. I just knew that there was something going on in business beyond analytics and marketing and strategy, and that there was something else preventing companies from succeeding, and that's what I love to do.
And, looking at what you do at your organization, where you really focus on organizational health. And I love that idea. I love the idea of if you can fix the organization and make sure that the people are functioning at a high level, the culture is strong, that people will respond to that. And I guess you have this premise that people are happy where they are, they're going to be more effective at the organization, and the organization is going to thrive.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, there's a big coincidence between people loving what they're doing and in a functional environment and the company actually performing well. And I discovered this fairly early in my career, not knowing that this was a field at all, that I was finding that everybody was focused on being smart in terms of you got to know more about technology and finance and strategy and all those kind of things. And I thought, well, how come all these smart companies, the Silicon Valley is full of them, are so bright, but they're not succeeding? And what I realized is that there's something more important than being smart, and that was being healthy. And it's the reason why Southwest Airlines, good friends of ours, and Chick-fil-A are so successful. When there's plenty of people that know how to fly planes and fry up a chicken sandwich, they're not. And it's the culture. And culture isn't some soft, esoteric, touchy-feely thing. I'm not into that. It's actually about how things get done. And boy, that's a competitive advantage greater than anything else. So that's what we do. We help CEOs. The first thing we do is we tell them we don't do touchy-feely stuff. We're not going to get naked and hold hands. We're going to help you build a culture that gets things done, and people are going to feel dignified when they're there. They're going to love work, and your company's going to do well. Your customers are going to love it, and so will your investors. So it's a beautiful thing that it all comes together.
How do you help those longtime brick and mortar organizations where the culture seems so ingrained and it's such a negative culture, without naming any names? But how do you pick? You start at the top, and how do you bring about a sea change for a culture with an organization?
It sounds trite, but it all starts with the person at the top, and they have to be bought into this. Organizational health is not something you can delegate to anyone. It's certainly not something you can ask HR to do or your chief operating officer. The person at the top has to say, I believe this is real and that it's a competitive advantage, and I will start by demanding that my team believes that it's real. I'm going to show them. I'm going to hold them accountable for doing it. If you can do that at the top of an organization, you can turn around a company of 400,000 people. If you have a company of 40 people and you don't believe it at the top, nothing you do is going to make a difference. So it really does start with that leadership team, which is where I spend 90% of my time, is working with CEOs and their teams. Not because they're more fun to hang out with, but because they're the ones that set the tone. And I'm absolutely convinced of that. If the CEO is willing to put her or his, reputation on the line and make his team or her team do this and to carry it one level down, I believe it's going to take root.
So it starts at the top, and that's our belief at the Ken Blanchard companies as well. If any sort of initiative that we bring into the organization starts at the top as well, we know that has a higher chance of succeeding. So for you, top level, executive level, CEO level buy-in is without a doubt paramount to the success of any initiative.
And oftentimes somebody in HR or another executive will come to us and say, hey, we really want to do this, and we'll sit down with the CEO, and if they're not on board, we just know we're going to be wasting their money and their time.
Yeah.
Really it does. I mean, leadership really matters. And it's unfortunate that sounds so trite because everybody talks about leadership. But the person at the top, whether it's a church, a school, a big corporation, or a department within a company, if the person at the top is not bought in, it isn't going to work.
Pat, how do you define leadership?
Well, I think it's, and Ken had been a dear friend of mine over the years, and this idea of servant leadership that he writes about and speaks about so often is just so important. I think leadership is the person who's willing to suffer the most in an organization for others. I believe that it really is a sacrificial duty and a sacrificial role. And so I think leading means I will be last to make the organization better, and I will be first to take the blame and first to share the credit. And so I think it's far rarer in society today than we think. Everybody goes to graduation speeches and hears people say, "Here, be a leader, go out and change the world." And I think, don't do that if you don't want to suffer for others. Because when people become leaders and it's about themselves, they do really, really bad things. So I think leadership is really about being a sacrificial person willing to suffer. That's not a very good recruiting message, but it usually gets the right people who understand why they're doing it. So, I mean, that's not the definition of leadership, but I think it's the one thing that separates those who really want to lead from those that don't.
That's a deep message. I appreciate you sharing that with me. So we're going to talk a little bit about your books, and you said and it's interesting. Your story about how you got into being an author is very similar to Dr. Henry Cloud's message as well.
One of my favorite people in the world, Henry Cloud. I could listen to that guy speak all day long.
He's fantastic. I enjoyed my discussion with him as well. And he talked about he had all his theories on flip charts everywhere. And somebody said, we want to buy that. And he said, well, I don't really have that. It's just on flip charts. And so we should write a book. And so it sounds like a very similar thing with your experience. So my first introduction with you, many people and I don't know who is in charge of some of your book titles. I think a book title goes a long way to get people to pick up a book. But the Five Dysfunctions of a Team was really my introduction to you. And we're here to talk about your newest book, The Ideal Team Player. Do you see this as a follow-up? Do you see this as going deeper on that first book?
Absolutely. In fact, I think I wrote 8 books or 7 books in between, which shocks me because after I wrote the first one, I thought I must be done. And then another idea came. And every time I finish, I think, well, this might be my last one, because I don't ever want to write a book about something unless I think there's something important that needs to be said. So when it came to The Ideal Team Player, it had been 7 or 8 books in between. And we didn't really realize this was going to be a book. But one of my friends, an author named Matthew Kelly, a good friend of mine, he knew about this theory that we had kind of accidentally discovered about the kind of qualities that would make somebody good at the 5 dysfunctions. He said, when are you going to write a book about that? And I said, I don't know. Do you think that's a book? He goes, yeah, I think it's a book. So we sat down and worked with it, and we said, oh, my gosh, I think it is. And you know something, Chad? It's selling more than any book I've ever written. And I will tell you, it's the book I struggled with the most in terms of, is there enough here? And I think the simplicity of it is really resonating with people. And it's a follow-on to the 5 Dysfunctions, because it's really about, okay, the 5 Dysfunctions is here's the things any group of people has to do to be an effective team. But the question is, are there some people that are just better at that than others? And I didn't answer that question after I wrote the book the first time, but then I realized that there was an answer. It happened to be my firm's core values, but we didn't realize it at the time because I was too slow to make the realization.
So you touched on a little bit of that, but let's dig in. Let's dig into this book a little bit. What are you trying to get across with the ideal team player?
What I'm trying to get across is there are these virtues that if you can find them in people and nurture them in the people that currently work with you and find them in people you want to hire, it makes the team building process so much faster and easier. And their virtues, they're not permanent qualities. Virtues are something that you can aspire to and develop. But there are virtues that if a person doesn't have them, it's going to be much more difficult to make the team work. And the 3 virtues are very simple. In fact, it's a disarmingly simple book because the virtues are humble, hungry, and smart. If a person's going to be a good team player, they have to be humble, really based in others, not themselves. And as Ken likes to say, a humble person is not one who, he quotes C.S. Lewis on this, is not one who thinks less of themselves, they just think about themselves less. And then the second one is hungry. Do they work hard? Are they innately desiring to work hard? And the last one is smart, not about book smart, but people smart. And the funny thing is, as simple as those are, the Venn diagram, the overlap between those 3 virtues, there's something kind of powerful there. Whereas if you can find people that share all of those virtues, man, it's a home run. And if a person's lacking one or more of those virtues, it's much more difficult.
So a question I ask within all of these discussions, it always comes out in my mind, are there people that, I hate to say, is it hopeless? Can people be trained? Can they develop these skills? Can they get better and better at these skills? Or are there just some people that won't fit into a team environment? For
the vast majority of people, you can develop them. There are people you'll meet you would need years of deep psychotherapy, and a miraculous change in their personality, and mainly if they just are not comfortable being vulnerable. There's some people that have been scarred in their lives and they just can't admit when they're wrong. They just can't be more interested in others. They just can't celebrate others. It's all about them. And I've run into a few people like that where you just hit a brick wall and you realize you can't possibly justify the time and energy to do this and still run the organization. Some people's work ethic, they just can't be hungry. And we've seen some people like that. They just never got told and taught how to work hard. But again, very few people can't overcome these things. But I would be remiss if I didn't say, there's some people that just don't belong on teams, but the vast majority of people can do it. So I would say generally you can develop these things. I really believe that.
So when you look at the book, do you see this as a development tool? So these are the areas you need to focus on and beef up and increase in your day-to-day these virtues, or do you see this as an identification process? So these are the people you want to really focus on.
The answer is yes. It's both. And because I like you hire people once, and it's really important to hire people. And I think a lot of people are seeing that. Oh my gosh, if in the interview process we really look for humble, hungry, and smart, we're going to avoid hiring those people that crush us and that waste money and time and that ruin one another's lives and make work unfulfilling. So it's really valuable in that. And we have a lot of tools in the book about how to hire and how to ask questions and how to really understand the deeper virtues of those people. But I love the developmental part. I love working with a team and saying, hey, everybody, this is my favorite exercise. Everybody, let's look at humble, hungry, smart. We'll define it real fast. Everybody rank yourself. First, second, and third. Even if you're wonderful, you have a third. Even if you struggle with a lot of them, one of them's third. Let's all identify our own third area of these 3. And then let's talk about what each of us could actually do to improve in that area. Man, I see people being really willing to acknowledge what area they need help in and to ask the people around them to coach them on a daily basis. I love to see people getting better. It's not just buy and sell decisions about should we hire them, should we fire them, but how can we make people better versions of themselves? So you can do both, and I think a lot of people are using it as a hiring tool, but I think it's a very powerful development tool as well.
So one of the joys of being able to do this podcast is I kind of luck into some free coaching here. So let's say that I did that exercise, and let's say that because I have to choose one, hungry. Let's just say that's my third. Right. Let's just say for whatever reason. And you're my coach now. You're walking me through that. What would that discussion look like?
Well, so let's understand what that might mean. That might mean like, I work hard, but sometimes finishing things isn't my thing, or I enjoy other things in life, and maybe I need to be a little bit more diligent about taking things to the next level and making sure that things are finished and helping my colleagues with their work when I'm done with mine. And I would say, okay, that's good. First of all, realize this can be dealt with. The second thing I would say is you got to admit it to your team members. You got to say that you guys have to know this. Whether or not you're aware of it or not, I know deep down inside of the three things, this is the area I need help with. And I'm not only going to ask you, I'm going to really demand that you guys be honest with me so that I can get better at this. That's the first thing, because they're going to see it. And if you can get them to be open with you and love you enough to tell you the truth, that's going to be the best thing. The other thing I would say is I'd say whenever you notice yourself doing one of these things, call it out. Call it out to others as well. I think the first and the biggest challenge we have is awareness, and the second one is the vulnerability to admit it to others. You're not going to be able to do this on your own probably, because if you could, you'd have done it already. And I would say if I'm your coach, I would say make sure that the people that work with you every day become your primary coaches. So what I would probably do is say, how much are you checking in with them? How honest are they with you? How much are you demanding that they give you difficult feedback even when they might not want to? So I'd probably coach you more about how you manage your real coaches, which is your colleagues and your coworkers. Because I'm not going to see you every day, and I'm not going to be able to say, hey, Chad, it looks like you short-armed that. It looks like you didn't finish that. It looks like you're not really putting enough effort into this. The people that you work with every day, man, when your family members, friends, and coworkers can tell you things about yourself that the average person won't, man, that's a golden situation for you.
It is, and it speaks to vulnerability. It speaks to the ability, because some of the things you're saying are triggering some conversations that I had with Brene Brown in an earlier recording, where she talked about, it's a beautiful thing when people are really honest with you, and then you can be honest with yourself, and you can be honest back, and therefore there's no filters.
And we live in a society that doesn't value that. We think we live in a society that says affirm everyone and everything. Don't ever say to somebody, hey, I don't think that's good for you. I don't think you should do that. I don't think that's going to lead to good things for you. So we live in a world where everybody's saying, oh, yeah, terrific. And the most valuable, like I said, the golden situations is when we have somebody who loves you enough to tell you the truth even when it hurts. And if you can nurture relationships like that, it's going to change your life. There's a lot of people in the world who have nobody, a lot of leaders who have nobody that are willing to tell them when they're naked. And, man, we need that. We need it bad.
This podcast is sponsored by the Ken Blanchard Companies. If you'd like to learn more, and there's a lot of free resources to better yourself and your organization, go to kenblanchard.com. You'll find all kinds of free tools and materials to help you and others grow, and they have a special offer right now. Send an email to podcast@kenblanchard.com with LeaderChat in the subject line. Now through the end of summer of 2018, one grand prize winner chosen randomly will receive a free one-on-one call with Ken Blanchard. 5 others will receive a signed copy of Ken's latest book, Servant Leadership in Action.
So we've talked about how this could be a diagnostic tool, and about how it can be a self-development opportunity for you and for team members. And then we also talked about it being a selection process. So is this something that you heartily recommend if you're putting a team together, if you're even looking at hiring practices?
Yes, and I do like talking about this, because I'm amazed at I joined the workforce in 1987 after I got out of college, and I don't think interviews have changed that much in most organizations. We still sit behind a desk and answer questions off of our resume, and there's so many better ways to go about understanding what virtues a person has that are going to make them a good team player. We still hire too much for technical skills or measurable skills, and we don't get to the behavioral stuff. And whether you're putting together a professional basketball team or a staff at church or hiring an executive team at a software company, those behavioral things are huge. And independent of your company's values, if you find humble, hungry, and smart people, and there are ways to get at that in interview questions, if you can find people like that, life is going to get a lot easier. And it's a serious competitive advantage, one that has ramifications on the bottom line, whether or not we can calculate that accurately.
Now, without giving away the whole book, what are some ways, for instance, you could really target in an interview process smart?
Well, if you're looking for smart, one of the things you're doing is you're asking people to that's one of the things you're actually looking at in the interview itself. More than the questions and the way they answer them, it's how they deal with other people. And one of the things I say is get them out of the office when you interview them. Take them. They say the best way to interview somebody would be to take them on a cross-country flight. Because by the time you get to the other end, you're going to know if you're sitting next to them, if you want to work with them. So you can't do that. But what I do is I get them out of the office. I want to take them to run an errand. I want to see them in a store, or I want to take them to my kids' soccer practice and see how they deal with a bunch of 8-year-olds. I think you got to get people out of the office and see how they actually manage in the real world, because that tells me a lot about smart. Do they seem to understand how people are feeling? Are they appropriate? Do they get people? Do they seem comfortable in their own skin? There's questions you can ask them, and there's certain, but if it's too rehearsed, you don't really know. The other thing is do group interviews. Sit there with 5 people on your team with this one person and see how they interact with people and how they deal with a group environment. Because most people in the world are going to have to work with groups of people. So I think the smart part is oftentimes about the process of how you're interviewing people more than just the questions you ask them in the interview. It's almost the context for the interview itself.
So important to hire for culture fit is what I'm hearing from you. Oh,
yeah. You can teach people how to do a lot of things. Most of the people that I hire do 3 jobs in their first year, because I'm not very good at figuring out exactly what they should do. But if they're a good fit, they're here forever. And then I've hired other people that had the technical skills, but I didn't pay enough attention to the culture, and it burned me. And so I had a friend recently who hired somebody, and the woman did not work out for her. And after a year of working there, a couple of the employees, good employees, quit because of this lady. And it cost the company lots of money in severance, and a lot of it set them back. And you know what she told me? She said, Pat, if I had just taken this woman shopping, I'd have seen the behavioral stuff. I never did it. I was so in a hurry to hire her. She had all the right resume requirements. I did a couple interviews, but nothing that really showed me what she was really like. So it's so critical to get them out of their skin a little bit.
You have such great energy. It comes across so authentically through my earphones. I guess I could say, because we're doing this, and I could tell that you love what you do. Yes. Why do you love this so much? Because you walk into some wastelands of organizations from time to time where you have to really roll up your sleeves, and it's really heavy lifting. Why is it that really what gets you up every day and lets you kind of bust through that door ready to go?
Chad, I think it's a neat question. It's good to reflect on this. God made me an ENFP, and that's called a catalyst. And I really love bringing out the best in other people. I really love that. And when I was a kid, I remember my dad used to come home from work, and he was really good at what he did, and I loved him, God rest his soul. But he was frustrated by management at his company. And I was a little kid. I didn't know what the hell that meant. I just knew that, 1, I loved my dad, and I wanted him to enjoy his job. And 2, I was going to get one of those job things one day, and I had to deal with that too. I would have to. And so early on, I said, why do people think work is supposed to be miserable? And when I got my first job, it was miserable. And I had a job that paid well and was supposed to be great. And I remember thinking, this is crazy. Wouldn't this company do better if people actually could be themselves and do their best at work? So for whatever reason, God just put in my heart the desire to let other people enjoy work, know who they are, become a better person. And I love seeing how they treat their family members and their friends and their colleagues as a result of that. So that just makes me excited. The other thing is, I'm not that smart, I don't think. I don't come from a long line of educated family members, and I didn't go get a graduate degree. I love helping people see simple things that they're just overlooking because they're too bent on finding something complicated. And so the combination between simplicity and watching people flower when they're frustrated just makes me excited. And I do think I can't hide that. I really enjoy that in my job. I'm very blessed.
I love that. I'm going to paraphrase here very poorly, but it's something. It reminds me of something that Ken said once about a few times about how if we do our job right and if we help develop these people in the right way, then we're not going to be a discussion at the dinner table, and that is probably one of the best gifts you can have.
Exactly. Or maybe we do it so well that we become the discussion, which is like that people go, I want to know this person. I want to learn from them. And Ken helped me see this. Ken and I met. We were in, of all places, Saskatchewan, Canada, which is as remote it's like in the middle of Canada. It's like 6 hours north of North Dakota or something. And I was speaking at an event, and I go outside, and it's snowy, and I get off stage, and here's this guy standing there who had the humility of, I thought he was my driver. He was the nicest guy, and I knew of Ken Blanchard, but I didn't know him, and he was just so interested in me and what I was talking about, and he was the first one to say, Pat, all of this stuff you're teaching is in the Bible. And of course, being a long-time Catholic and Christian, I was like, yeah, I knew that. But he made that connection for me. And it's just a wonderful thing to meet somebody like him. He's that guy you do want to talk about at the dinner table.
Yeah, and I've said it many a times, and I've said it to him. I've said it about him. I've said it around one of the most authentic men, probably the most authentic man I've ever met in my life.
And generous.
Yeah, incredibly generous.
Interested in others before himself, for sure.
Well, listen, we've just got a couple more questions here. So, the goal of this podcast is really to help, those learning development and talent development people in organizations who haven't had a chance to pick up a book yet. It's, to let them know the ones that are out there they should be really picking up because they're all so busy. So when you think about that group, the L&D folks and the talent folks, what are some natural connections between what you're covering in your latest book and your latest teachings out there and what they might be trying to achieve in their organizations?
Well, I think that, there's so many, learning and development is so interesting in training and how we can make people better. Sometimes if we can reduce it down to a very simple process and say, let's go back and see how well all of our people are doing in these three areas. Because what I find is people are very open to talking about these. They look at this list and they go, oh my gosh, if I could do that, I'd be incredible. I was talking to my 14-year-old son about it the other day, and he was able to analyze himself and go, yeah, I probably need to be more humble, Dad. I think I'm hungry, but I don't think I'm humble enough. So people really resonate with this. And right away they're like, what can you do to help me? So I think having this conversation turns an employee into someone who really wants to get better. And it gives them a simple enough model so they don't feel like, how many modules do I have to do and how many things? I think sometimes people are like, just give me the simplest plan I can have to become better. So I think for a lot of L&D people, a lot of times they're looking for simple tools and ways to help their people understand self-improvement. And sometimes that's the best tool of all.
Awareness is an amazing gift.
Yeah, and I think if it's too detailed, too complicated, people get lost.
All right, last question as we wrap up. What is one thing that you hope the listeners today will take away from our conversation?
I think that they can understand that virtues matter. And we call them virtues for a reason. They're not characteristics. They're not traits that are endemic. I think that we all aspire to virtue, and humility is the greatest of all virtues. And we start there because I think if we can make people more virtuous and more hungry to grow in virtue, everybody wins. And so I guess I want people to have a sense of hope and a sense of, hey, I'm not perfect. We're all broken. But if we can have a sense of that we can get better and a way to do that, that's good news.
So what are you excited about right now, and where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Well, I'm sure there's ways to find me that I'm not even aware of because I'm not the most connected guy in the world. My staff kind of keeps me off of things because they know I would get too distracted. But the website, tablegroup.com, is the place where people can go find me and connect with me. I know I have a LinkedIn page, and we do monitor that, and there's a lot of people out there beyond me writing about our stuff. I have a Facebook page, but again, I'm not allowed to look at it because I'd probably be, too distracted. And so that's probably, and we tweet, people can sign up. We're starting to get into that more and more. I'm not telling people what I had for breakfast, but when we have something that's interesting to say, we try to put it out there. So those are probably the best ways. And what I'm excited about right now, man, every day is different. I think right now in my life, I'm most excited about my 10-year-old and 14-year-old. My 18-year-old boys are in college, and I'm thank God for that. And I have these two younger sons at home, and I'm just really enjoying them. And my wife and I are having fun with that. So as far as work goes, I know there's another book coming, but we're not sure yet. We're looking at that, making sure it's worthwhile. And I'm happy for Christmas.
Yeah. It's a good time of year.
I don't know when this is going to air. This might air in February, in which case I hope everybody had a great Christmas. But right now I'm looking forward to Christmas.
This will air after Christmas, but who knows? Maybe people will download it and subscribe to it next Christmas, and it'll be very timely for them then.
There you go.
Well, listen, I appreciate it.
This has been a lot of fun.
Patrick, thank you so much. We were talking to Patrick Lencioni here on the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure connecting with you.
God bless you.
And thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you enjoyed this interview and like to learn more and also help us grow the audience, please subscribe to the LeaderChat podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, or wherever you're listening. And please share this with your friends. The best way you can help us grow, though, is feedback. As Ken Blanchard says, feedback is the breakfast of champions. So please write us a review if you haven't already. And by the way, this podcast is sponsored by the Ken Blanchard Companies. If you'd like to learn more, there's even a lot of free resources to better yourself and your organization. Go to kenblanchard.com. You'll find all kinds of free tools and materials to help you and others grow. Thanks again to our guests for joining us today. For now, I have the pleasure of turning it over to Ken Blanchard for his thoughts on what we discussed. Here it is, your final minute with Ken Blanchard.
As you could tell, Patrick and I have a mutual admiration society. I just think he's just a fabulous young man. I'm just so excited that these young people are coming up, the Henry Clouds and the Brene Browns and the Simon Sinek, I mean, at 77, I have to admit I might not be around forever, but it's just so great that these great minds are going to be here. And Patrick and I agree that culture comes first. If you're really going to help somebody create a great organization, you got to look at what is their culture, how do they operate with their people, and all the great ones. He was talking about Southwest Airlines and Chick-fil-A. They all think, as I've said a number of times, that their people are their number one customer. And if you take care of your people, empower them, and love on them, then they go out of their way to take care of your number two customer. Your people use your products and services, and then they become raving fans, and that takes care of the owners. So it's really kind of simple. One of the things I really loved is him talking about the virtues, and I think you really need to think about where are you in the humbled, hungry, smart thing. I think the one I need to work on is the smart one. My mom always said, now, Ken, don't act like you're a big deal. You're not better than anybody else. God didn't make any junk, And then my father said, Ken, if you're going to do anything, throw your whole heart into it and do it, And smart, I was in school, Patrick and I are both, ENFPs, and schools don't always know how to deal with us, And so I wasn't, applauded for my smartness. And so I think that's why I've worked with so many people. Of all the books I've written, over 60, I've only written 2 by myself. And I just love to learn. So I'm continuing working on that smart learning piece. But it really is interesting to look at those in terms of team members, because once you have those, they're humbled and they're really ready to work and hard, and they're learners. Wow, you got something. So thanks, Patrick. You're fabulous, and I think this is a powerful, powerful message for you all. God bless. Take care of yourself. And Patrick, you're the best.